They look like they come from your worst nightmares. There's no evidence they exist, but all the scary stories about them still sometimes sound so real, passed down from generation to generation. Which one is your favorite? The first creature that probably comes to your mind is Bigfoot, a giant creature that reminds you of an ape and allegedly leaves extremely large footprints and other traces that make people in the area of the Pacific Northwest wonder if it's really there. It's so popular, other similar beasts got their own legends too. Like the Mogollon Monster, something people also call the Arizona Bigfoot. Reported along the Mogollon Rim, this mysterious creature is 7 feet tall and has big red eyes. Stories say its body is covered with long reddish-brown or black hair, besides its face, chest, feet, and hands. It mimics coyotes, birds, and other wildlife, emitting strange whistle sounds at the same time. The creature tends to explore campsites when it gets dark. It builds nests out of twigs, pine needles, and leaves. And if you're in that area and someone is throwing stones from locations you can't see, yep, Mogollon Monster. This creature is omnivorous, which means it eats both plants and animals. And it prefers to wander at night, lurking for innocent prey lost in the woods. Urauli, a 10-foot mythical creature people say hides in the southwestern woodland parts of Alaska. It's a hulking giant beast known for its extremely long limbs. Legends say their lanky arms are so long they reach their ankles. The creature is covered in a thick coat of hair. The only thing you can see on its face, not covered in the hair, is the creature's eerily luminescent eyes. The legend says Urauli use their glowing eyes to hypnotize their prey. But not us, since stories say they prefer to catch deer. And they're known to be kind towards humans. And some claim the Urauli are actually just a type of Bigfoot. Wendigo. This terrifying creature is said to be hiding across the northern forests of Canada and the United States, always looking if there's some lost wanderer. The story says the Wendigo used to be a lost hunter. The freezing winters transformed him into a fierce 15-foot-tall beast with desiccated skin tightly pulled over its large, pointy bones. Stories about this creature showed up in the 20th century, and people say the beast still roams around the forest in long, cold winters, constantly looking for lost people he could grab from the darkness. Lake Worth Monster. This scary creature that's part man, part goat is also called the Island Monster. This 7-foot-tall monster is so strong it could hurl car tires like they were just plastic toys. In a worst nightmare scenario, it could appear in the darkness, sailing from the treetops and fiercely landing with full force on the hood of passing cars. That's how the first people who reported its existence described it. Lake Worth is located west of Dallas and east of Fort Worth. There's a landmass in the middle of this mystical lake known as Greer Island. The legend says that's where this scary monster, also known as Fort Worth's answer to Bigfoot, roams. And that's where some skeptics and thrill seekers still go, wandering around and trying to discover if the legend is true. Lurking in the darkness with its scary red eyes, meet the Mothman, a humanoid beast reportedly seen in the 1960s in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. On one cold night in November of 1966, 2 young couples reported to the police that they saw a big gray creature with glowing red eyes. It looked like a flying man with wings around 10 feet wide. During the next couple of days, more and more people said they saw the same thing. Later, a wildlife biologist from West Virginia University told reporters that these descriptions fit the sandhill crane. It's a big American crane almost as tall as a human being. It has a 7-foot wingspan and circles of red around its eyes. The gigantic bird may have got out of its migration route and started these stories. Or did it really? Fresno night crawlers. They're not that tall, considering they're monsters, about 5 feet. The upper part of their body is pretty small, so most of their height is their legs. These creatures have allegedly made 2 appearances so far. Once, People saw them in Fresno, California. In contrast, the other time was in Yosemite National Park in California. Both times they were in videos of poor quality, so it wasn't easy to find details of their upper body. But the creature is considered thin and white with no arms. At least, we can't see them. It also has pretty short and stilt-like feet. Have you heard of the slide rock bolter? It's said to be hiding somewhere in the mountains of Colorado. To be precise, in Lizard Head Mountain, only a stone's throw southwest from Telluride. It's some sort of leviathan that lives on the land. This mountain whale carefully observes its surroundings with beady eyes while chilling atop Lizard Head. It hangs from the peak while its split, clawed tail faces its body downward. If anything steps into its territory, the beast lifts its malign fluke immediately and bolts down the mountainside. With its jaw full of razor-sharp teeth wide open, it gobbles whatever or whoever is in front of it, including miners, lost tourists, and loggers. It sweeps through trees and destroys all natural life that's been in its path for more than 100 years. Or at least that's what the legend says. Wow, that's the scariest one for me so far. Altamaha. Somewhere in southeastern Georgia, close to the mouth of the Altamaha River, there's a hissing sea monster hiding. It's one of the biggest rivers in Georgia that empties into the Atlantic Ocean, and the entire area that surrounds the river is full of small islands, canals, dikes, ponds, acres of marshes, and old rice fields. Perfect for such a monster to hide, don't you think? The story says this unusual cryptid has a sturgeon-like body, including a bony ridge on its top. Due to its front flippers, the creature swims like a dolphin. His snout reminds me of a crocodile. His teeth are large and sharp, whereas his eyes are big and protruding. The beast is green or gray with a white yellowish underbelly and is up to 30 feet long. There's no physical evidence the Altamaha really lives there, but the legends date back centuries when people started talking about an enormous snake-like beast that hissed and bellowed. Loch Ness Monster, or how many like to call it, Nessie. This myth dates back from old times, all the way to a group of people that lived in ancient Scotland known as the Picts. The legend started to grow in the 1930s. Back then, a road near Loch Ness was finished, offering a nice view of the lake without bigger obstacles. And in April of 1933, a couple noticed there was a large animal. They compared it to a prehistoric monster or dragon. Most people imagine it as a plesiosaur, which is basically a marine dinosaur. The beast quickly crossed the couple's car's path and then disappeared below the water's surface. Later that year, some researchers even found big footprints. They believed they were from a pretty soft-footed solid creature around 20 feet long. Later, some determined the tracks were the same as the ones that a hippopotamus leaves. Plus, scientists said the lake wasn't that nutrient-rich for such a large predator. There are not enough animals to support such a beast at the top of the food chain. But the legend about a giant mythological creature has moved on and still makes people across the world wonder if there's really something hiding deep down in the dark, murky waters of Loch Ness.
Welcome to the Hall of Monsters. I see you are wearing your protective gear. That's good, because during your visit here, your safety is not guaranteed. So, every step you take, beware, for the monsters you'll see ahead are the scariest ones from Japanese folktales. If they don't haunt you during your visit, they sure will haunt your dreams. And let me tell you, no anime you have watched could have prepared you for this. I already see doubt and fear in your eyes. So let's begin our tour before you lose that little flicker of courage left within you. There's no better monster to greet you than the Naparabo. You might not notice it, but it is happy to have new victims. I mean visitors. Naparabo looks like an ordinary human being in almost every way. That is why it can blend in seamlessly with human society. But things will quickly get uncanny once you meet face to face with it. You see, it has no face at all. Its head is like a blank orb. But here's the thing, Naparabo is quite harmless. It only frightens people, that's it. In legends and stories, it usually does that by impersonating someone familiar to its potential victims. And once it has their attention, it causes its features to disappear, almost as if erasing a pencil drawing. What is left is a blank, smooth sheet of skin with no eyes, nose, or mouth. So, as you might have imagined, its true identity and what it really looks like is unknown. One of the stories in which Naparabo appears is about a lazy fisherman. Despite his wife's warnings, he goes fishing from a sacred imperial koi pond. On his way there, he meets another fisherman who also warns him not to go there. Still, he ignores him. Once he arrives at the pond, a beautiful young woman begs him not to fish there. But he doesn't listen to her either. That is when she wipes off her face. When the fisherman runs home to hide with fear, his wife confronts him and criticizes him for his wrongdoing. Plot twist, only to wipe her face as well. Speaking of fish and ponds, let's move on to Cup Fa. Don't fall for their rather funny and mascot-like appearance. Cup Fa is a dangerous monster you wouldn't want to cross paths with. These creatures, which are often depicted as humanoid turtles, live in and around water bodies such as lakes, ponds, or rivers. Cup Fas are generally the size of a human child, yet they are physically stronger than a grown man. Their skin color can vary from different shades of green to bright red and even blue. In addition, they can either be slimy or covered in scales. As unique as each Cup Fa can be, they all have a turtle shell on their back and a mouth resembling a beak. Their arms and legs are webbed between the toes and fingers, but the most characteristic part of their appearance is the bowl-like objects that lie on top of their skulls. This is considered to be the source of Cup Fa's power and life force, and must be kept filled with water at all times. If this water spills or the bowl is damaged in any way, a Cup Fa can become incredibly weakened and will be unable to move. Cup Fas are known to cause mischief. Although they can befriend humans, you should always approach one with caution, because they might try to lure you into the water to feed on you. However, there's also a chance they might challenge you to a sumo wrestling match. Just know that they are really good at it before accepting this challenge. Yet again, if you do find yourself in a match, here's a pro tip. Find a way to trick the Cup Fa into bowing so low that the water in its dish spills out. And hey, if you refill that water later, you can bring the creature under your command. Take a look at this lady here. She seems to be sleeping peacefully, right? Well, look again. There's something strange going on with her neck. Rokurokubi might appear as an ordinary woman by day, but when it's nighttime and her body is asleep, her neck stretches to incredible lengths and roams around freely. Although Rokurokubi is no less creepy than the other creatures, there is something that makes her different. It is that, unlike others, she is actually not born as a monster. She used to be a human being just like us, but she was transformed by a curse resulting from some evil action or misdeed. But the story gets sadder, because the mentioned misdeed doesn't necessarily have to be her own doing. In many cases, it is either Rokurokubi's husband or father who actually committed evil actions. But she's the one paying the price because the curse only affects women. If you think Rokurokubi cannot be that harmful or scary with that heartbreaking backstory, then you're right. Her head might attack small animals sometimes, or she might cause mischief by scaring nearby people. But that's mostly it. What she loves to do in her night travels, however, is to lick up lamp oil with her long tongue. Well, who are we to judge someone's favorite food? Nukakubi is Rokurokubi's much scarier sister. She is like an advanced version of her, sort of like an upgraded Pokemon. While Rokurokubi's head is always attached to her body, Nukakubi's head can come off from the neck and float around far and away from her body. The worst part is, though, she can get bloodthirsty sometimes, and that's when her detached head will start preying on humans to quench that thirst. However, she is not invincible. It is believed that if her body moves by any chance while it is sleeping, and her head is still floating around as that happens, then her head cannot return back to the body. Hope that comforts you a bit. You see a roll of cotton. I see a life-threatening monster. According to Japanese folktales, especially the myth of Tsukumogami, inanimate objects receive a soul, therefore become alive and self-aware after serving their owners for 100 years. Although they are usually harmless, they might tend to play small pranks on people. Yet again, they still have the capacity to get angry and vengeful, especially if there are people who threw them away or didn't treat them well. They might group up to take revenge. Ittan Momen is one of those object monsters. These possessed long and narrow sheets of cloth which were used to make clothes, can be seen flying through the night sky. They are often malicious and attack people by wrapping their bodies around a person's face and neck, strangling or smothering them. In some tales, it is said that wrapped cloths would spin around and quickly come flying to wrap themselves around people and take them away to the skies. Joker's laughter is gonna sound like music to your ears once you hear this lady's. Waruhion is a female-looking monster that lives in the mountains, but despite her non-threatening appearance, meeting one will actually put you in a really dangerous position. She will smile and start laughing at you. And once she does, you'll realize that her laughter is somewhat toxic and infectious. It will cause you to start laughing along too. But even if she leaves, you will continue laughing after her until you are out of breath and unable to stand. Even if you were strong enough to resist laughing along with her, you would still not be safe. You see, merely hearing her laughter, no matter how far away she cackles, is enough to put you in a stupor. You'll be haunted by that annoying and ear-piercing sound wherever you go, for the rest of your life. However, it's not like anybody who travels through the mountains will meet her. There is one way to avoid this laughing curse altogether. You see, she appears to people only on the 1st, 9th, and 17th day of each month. So, plan your travels accordingly.
There's a heavy snowstorm. The cold penetrates his bones. His legs are almost knee-deep in snow. Experienced hunter Joe LaBelle makes his way through the forest, covering his face from the headwind. Any other person would have already fallen and screamed in despair, but not Joe LaBelle. He can survive in any circumstances and always knows what to do. Right now, he's heading to one of the villages in the far north of Canada. This small settlement is located on Lake Anjikuni. The inhabitants of this village are Inuit, indigenous people of North America. Joe hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time. He needs a good sleep and a hot meal, which he hopes to get from the hospitable Inuits. Through trees and a white haze, he notices the silhouettes of tents. Smoke is coming from some houses. Joe will probably get there in time for lunch. He reaches the village, and at this moment, the wind calms down. The blizzard has ended. The hunter speeds up and goes toward the village, located along the frozen lake. It's strange, but there are no locals anywhere. Probably everyone is just sitting in their houses, waiting out the blizzard. "Hello!" Joe says loudly, but gets no response. Oh, great! Smoke is coming out of this tent. Joe knocks on the wall, but no one opens it. He knocks a few more times and goes inside. The little tent is empty. All things are in their places. There's a piece of cloth with needles and thread on the table. Firewood is smoldering in the fireplace. It seems that people have just left this place. Joe goes into the next tent and sees the same picture. All things are in their places, but there are no people. Joe walks past the tents and sees a pit where a bonfire once burned. There's a rope above it with the meat that the Inuit were cooking hanging on it. For some reason, they didn't eat it. Lake Anjikuni is part of a chain of waterways. Here, the Inuits fished and traded various goods. Usually, there are many people here, but now something has forced them to leave their homes. Why did they leave their things behind? And where did they go? There are no tracks around the village. All the sleds are in place. The Inuits have even left their dogs here, and dogs help them to hunt and ride sleighs. No one will leave warm clothes and dogs here when moving away, especially in severe weather. Joe LaBelle knows all this, so he concludes that something terrible has happened here. His body is shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. After going around the entire settlement, he finds not a single soul. Terrified, he leaves the village, heads for the nearest telegraph pole, and sends a message to the police. After a while, more and more people arrive. The police are trying to find traces of missing people and figure out what has happened, but there's nothing. Near the village, they find an empty grave. During the ceremony, the Inuits placed stones around the burial site. The rocks around the open pit lie untouched. which means it wasn't an animal that dug it up, but who or what needed it. About 30 people lived in the village, and they're all gone. Local residents from neighboring villages can't help, since they have no idea what has happened. The only thing that the police have noticed is unusual blue lights. In this area, the northern lights are a common phenomenon. People living here regularly see a glow in the starry sky, but the police have seen something else: pulsing blue lights. Also, other hunters have witnessed something similar. They say that some strange things were flying in the sky. This all happened in 1930. It's been almost 90 years since the disappearance of the village, and people have created a bunch of theories. The most popular of them is an attack of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the blue lights in the sky that the locals and the police saw were spaceships. Some believe that one ominous night, these ships flew to the settlement and took away all the people. In addition to these sci-fi versions, there were also more realistic ones. Internet users have found out that Joe LaBelle didn't have a hunting license. Maybe he wasn't a professional and made it all up. But at that time, many hunters didn't have a license, so Joe's words may be true. But if we try to find out where all this information came from, we'll see that the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s. But none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjikuni is true. Perhaps this entire story was made up. Now let's leave the snows of Canada and head for the hot plains of India. In this big country, there's one sinister village where people also disappeared without a trace. This happened in the first half of the 19th century. Still, locals avoid this place even now because they believe that invisible evil forces live there. Let's check and find out what happened to the village of Kuldara. It's located in the district of Rajasthan. To get there, you can use a taxi to get to the nearest village or city. The village is located far from other settlements. It looks deserted. There are only ruins. It looks like archaeologists have recently dug this place out of the ground and left it here. But this is not an ancient city. The village was abandoned more than 200 years ago. But up to that point, this place had been thriving. Kuldara was a large village. Local people were mostly farmers. They sold their agricultural products. And then, one night, everything changed. People abandoned their homes and stuff and ran away from there. No one knows why they did it, and no one knows where they went. Nobody has ever seen the inhabitants of Kuldara again. Apart from tourists, almost no one comes here. The locals are sure that the village is cursed and is the center of paranormal activity. If you ask residents of other nearby towns or read the information on the internet, you'll learn a couple of legends about this place. One popular version says that people left this village because of a lack of water. However, this version doesn't explain why the residents did it overnight and left their things behind. According to another version, the villagers ran away to save the daughter of the Kuldara chief. One local ruler fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. He threatened the locals with grave consequences if the girl rejected him. The ruler gave them 1 day to make a decision. The residents disagreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village together with the chief and his daughter. But if this is true, why did no one else see these people? They must have escaped to another settlement. In addition, they needed their things on the way there. The stories of Kuldara and Lake Anjikuni have one thing in common. People left a comfortable and safe place for an unknown reason. A similar story happened in Ireland with a small village on the island of Achill. About 40 simple houses made of stone and straw were located along the valley of Keem Bay. The village was mentioned in documents dated back to the 1830s as a group of small buildings. But today, there's practically nothing left of it. except pieces of walls and small mounds of ground. People from other settlements don't remember this village, but we know about it thanks to the records of travel writers. They describe the incredible beauty of this place and the village in their diaries. Students of the local archaeological school tried to find the answers. They started excavations and discovered that the villagers could have left the village because of hunger or some disease.
The LaLaurie Mansion, located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, has a grim reputation. Its former owner, Madame Delphine McCarthy LaLaurie, was a wealthy socialite in the early 19th century. The urban legend says that she treated her workers very badly. One night on April 10, 1834, Madame LaLaurie's house began to burn. Madame and her family managed to escape, but she abandoned her workers. They were locked inside the house. The locals, outraged by her negligence, gathered around the house, broke some of its walls, and eventually stole the remaining possessions. After the fire, the LaLaurie family escaped to Paris. Another private mansion was built on this Louisiana land. But it's said that the ghosts of those workers are still trapped inside the property. They tend to bother living people demanding justice. Today, the house is private, but you can book a tour and hear this story in detail. By the way, the mansion and its notorious owner played a big part in the American Horror Story franchise, although they didn't actually film the series in that particular house. American actress and director Kathy Bates played Madame LaLaurie and showcased the quirky character of this famous woman. So you can check it out if you're not afraid. Our next creepy destination was also shown in a movie franchise, the Amityville Horror. The media says this Dutch colonial-style home is located in the village of Amityville in New York. George and Kathy Lutz bought this property in 1975 for $80,000. The low price was due to the tragedy that happened in the house 1 year before. One night, a young man named Ronnie DeFeo, who lived in the house, took the lives of all his family members. The Lutz family began to notice strange activities in the house, such as phantom odors, unreasonably low temperatures, and loud sounds of unknown origin. According to the Lutz family, one day they called a preacher to clear the grim vibes, but he felt very bad during the ritual and his hands started bleeding. The Lutzes fled the house in a rush. Their spooky story inspired the Amityville Horror, a book written by American author Jay Anson and several successful horror movies. Although the house was reconstructed, it still exists. However, its address has been changed to confuse the trail and prevent crowds of tourists from gathering around it. Do you recognize this seemingly cute house in Harrisville, Rhode Island? It's known as one of the most haunted houses in America. The property earned its notorious reputation after multiple people lost their lives in this house over the years. In 1970, the Perrons family began to live here, and according to the legend, an invisible being lived along with them. At first, the entity was playful, but then it started getting more sinister. The family members experienced physical attacks and unexplainable illnesses. They invited the famous mystery hunters, Ed and Lorraine Warren, to research this case, which later inspired a book and the movie The Conjuring, released in 2013. In 2019, the property was purchased by the Heisens family, who also investigated mysteries. They reported some weird stuff going on in the house too, and eventually developed a successful business on haunted tourism. They sold the property for nearly $1.5 million in 2022. Let's move on to Tennessee. The urban legend tells a creepy story that started in 1804. John Bell and his family moved to this peaceful-looking farm in North Carolina. At first, everything went well, but 13 years later, the family began to experience bone-chilling events. At first, they started seeing weird animal-like shadows around the farm. Soon, these mysterious guests began to whisper and eventually talk out loud. Some mysterious entity began to wake up the family at night with loud noises and attacks. It particularly bothered their young daughter, Betsy Bell. Invisible hands grabbed Betsy by the hair and hit her body. When she grew up and was about to get married, the entity did everything to break the engagement, saying that Betsy wouldn't be happy with her groom. Rumors about these scary events spread throughout the village, and the locals began to visit the farm, hoping to see it for themselves. They called the entity Bell Witch. Many years have passed, but the locals still believe that the phantom of the evil witch lives in these places and hides in a cave near the farm. Ohio is one of the most notoriously haunted states in the USA. One of its legendary spots is the Mansfield Reformatory, a former prison that supposedly hosts the country's most creepy entities. The prison is nearly 130 years old. It was closed in 1990 and soon gained fame, especially after becoming the filming location for The Shawshank Redemption. And since we're passing through Ohio, let's take a look at another spooky place. The Chippewa Lake Amusement Park used to attract many guests with its various rides, roller coasters, and iconic Ferris wheel. But in the 1970s, 100 years after opening, the park was forced to close. It happened due to poor maintenance and low attendance. The park has gone through multiple fires, so today it looks like a bunch of creepy ruins overgrown with shrubs and rust. Mark Twain had been living in this charismatic house in Hartford, Connecticut for about 17 years. In this period, he wrote both The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Today, this property serves as a museum that showcases the author's life. But it's also known for some mysterious phenomena. Multiple visitors reported hearing odd noises and seeing a phantom of a woman in white. The most haunted part of the house is the billiard room. Twain used to chill there a lot during his stay, and today, some visitors claim they can smell tobacco smoke as they pass through. Now, Pennsylvania has lots of terrifying tales to offer. Despite its chic appearance, this fancy mansion has been empty for a while now. Its owner, Peter Widener, finished the construction after losing his beloved wife, Hannah, during a tragic yacht trip. It happened at the end of the 19th century, and eventually, Widener lost multiple relatives in this house. He was wealthy enough to invest in the Titanic construction. Perhaps he was fascinated by the idea of an unsinkable ship. But unfortunately, both Peter's oldest son and grandson lost their lives when the Titanic sank. Eventually, the mansion was abandoned. But it's said that the phantoms of the Widener family are still there. And speaking of the Titanic, Molly Brown was one of the survivors. She got famous for rowing a lifeboat for about 7 hours before reaching a safe place. But Molly's own mansion in Denver gained a spooky reputation. She owned the haunted property together with her husband, who ran a mining business. Over the years, multiple people reported seeing phantoms of cats and human figures running down the staircase of the house. The witnesses of such visions insist that something spooky is definitely going on behind these walls. Today, the mansion operates as a museum, so you can go and see it for yourself. And how about meeting a creepy phantom while doing some casual shopping in Soho? The urban legend dates back to 1799. A young lady, Gulielma Elmore Sands, tried to escape with her lover, Levi Weeks. They were tenants in the same boarding house. Around 2 weeks later, her body was found at the bottom of a well in the building that today hosts a large retail store, COS. After the horrifying discovery, the police arrested Levi. Although he was acquitted, Sands' phantom is said to haunt the building as a warning to other ladies. The creepiest thing is that the well is still there, and shoppers can see it in the basement at the back of the men's department. Now, brace yourself and welcome to the famous haunted toy store in Sunnyvale, California. The legend says that the land under the property used to be a plantation owned by Martin Murphy. He hired a preacher, Johnny Johnson, who fell in love with Murphy's daughter, Elizabeth. But she got engaged to a lawyer. Johnny's heart was broken, and he lost his life in an accident while chopping wood. Today, Johnny's phantom reportedly wanders around the Toys R Us store, still chasing his beloved Elizabeth. Customers and employees report seeing objects moving on their own, hearing mysterious footsteps, and even Johnny's whispers over the intercom system. Ooh. Alright, so let's start our journey with one of the most famous and scary vanished villages. It's located in India, the district of Rajasthan. This is Kuldara village. Unlike other abandoned places, this one is difficult to get to because the locals won't want to take you there. People are afraid of this place and try to avoid it. You can't get a taxi and drop off near this spot. The driver will tell you where to go. You won't find any traces of civilization nearby. The village is located in a hot desert area, but when you get close to it, you'll feel an unpleasant chill down your back. You won't find any vegetation because of the heat. There are only ruins of buildings and sand-covered roads. It seems as if you're walking through the excavations of an ancient city, but Kuldara is not so old. It only vanished in 1825. Before this time, the village had been thriving. It was almost a town consisting of many small settlements united into communities. Residents were busy with agriculture there. Plus, they went mining and extracted valuable gypsum rocks and minerals. But suddenly, everything changed overnight. For some unknown reason, people abandoned their homes and ran away. No one knows why, and no one has ever seen the residents again. Locals living in the nearest areas are sure that this place is cursed, so they never come close to it. They think this is the center of power from the other world. Some people feel sick here, others claim to see phantoms, and still others experience irrational fear. But tourists like to go there. The simplest and least scary vision says that people left the village because of the lack of water. Still, this version seems weird. If there had been a lack of water, people would have planned the change of location instead of running away in a hurry. The second version is way more mystical. There's a legend that one cruel ruler collected large taxes from this community. He fell in love with the daughter of the Kuldara chief and threatened that he would collect higher taxes if the girl refused to marry him. He gave her 1 day to make a decision. None of the residents agreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village. Those who don't believe in all these rumors can spend a night in a tent there. Chances are you'll hear someone screaming or feel someone walking and knocking on your tent. Nah, just kidding. Our next village is in the U.S., in the state of Pennsylvania. More precisely, it's not even a village, but a borough called Centralia. This place looks totally lifeless. Burnt trees, dried grass, empty buildings. Almost all the roads here have huge cracks. People sprinkle them with gravel to decrease the amount of thick smoke that's pouring from the ground all the time. This abandoned place has been burning for more than 50 years. No wonder this place reminds of something. The authors of the horror game Silent Hill got inspiration from this town. Centralia was a mining town with shops, cafes, libraries, and happy residents. People worked in the mines to get anthracite coal. They used one of the underground tunnels as a landfill for garbage. And then, in 1962, according to the popular version, they decided to get rid of garbage by burning it. The plan failed. As soon as the garbage caught fire, it spread throughout the mine. Then, all mining work in the town stopped because of the increased level of carbon dioxide. Residents didn't manage to extinguish the fire, and it started to spread underground throughout the whole city. Roads began to heat up. The soil became poisonous. Thick smoke slowly filled the streets. People were evacuated from this place. By 1992, Centralia was completely abandoned. The town looks ominous, and some people believe it's not just because of the fire. They believe not all people managed to evacuate, and their phantoms are still walking through the burning streets, waiting for someone to finally put an end to this eternal fire. Just imagine a prosperous, beautiful village where people do agriculture on fertile land and bake delicious bread. And then, bang! Everything disappears. There were only traces on the ground and a couple of bricks left from beautiful stone houses, mills, and chapels. Huge fertile fields became abandoned, and no one knows why. Well, welcome to the English village of Gainsthorpe in Lincolnshire, or rather what's left of it. From above, you'll see earthen ramparts on the grassy field, the outlines of roads, sunken hollows, and barely distinguishable contours of the walls of houses and barns. If you come here, you may not even notice the traces of the village. It's just an unusual green field. But in the 17th century, life was thriving here. let's try to solve this mystery. The first mention of this place dates back to 1086. I wasn't around then. Since that time, it was prospering. There were about 19 fertile fields, a chapel, a mill, a bridge, and a manor house where the lords lived. In total, there were about 25 buildings. From the records dating to the 16th century, you can find that quarries appeared in the village. That is, this place not only got wealthy, but also kept pace with progress. Then, by 1616, the village had become completely abandoned. Scientists are still looking for an answer to this question. Some believe that something terrible and mystical happened to the village. One of the main hypotheses explaining what happened is the plague. Another version is that Gainsthorpe still couldn't catch up with progress. In the 17th century, there was a transition from rural to urban life. Industrialization had begun. Many young people left their native villages to search for a better life. Some believe that groups of robbers and thieves settled in the village. They turned Gainsthorpe into their base and eventually plundered it all. The exact reason is still unknown, but the good news is that, theoretically, the village can be returned. Specialists can reconstruct the ruins and recreate agriculture. The hardest part, though, is to find funding. A similar fate befell the small village of Achill Island in Ireland. About 40 simple houses made of clay and straw were located along the valley washed by Keem Bay. And it was just a fantastic place to live. Coast, mountains, crystal clear water, and rich soil. The village was founded in 1838. Now, there are several mounds of ground and small pieces of walls left of it. Locals living in neighboring settlements don't remember this village. Or maybe they know something, but don't want to say anything to anybody. Only travel writers described it in their diaries as a place of serene beauty. Now, many towns nearby still exist, but why did this one disappear? An inexplicable phenomenon that sweeps entire villages off the face of the earth? An unknown, mystical, scary force? If there is nothing fantastic about this village's disappearance, then why don't people build any new houses here? Perhaps they're afraid of something. So, the local archaeological school students decided to find the answer to this question. They started excavating the village in search of clues. They found out that some kind of trouble happened to this place in the middle of the 19th century, but it's not known exactly what. At that time, a terrible period of famine came. Perhaps people simply left their homeland to find food elsewhere. Anyway, work on excavation continues, and the students intend to uncover the truth. In the 20th century, more and more villages became abandoned all over the world. The main reason is the relocation of residents. Young people don't want to live away from the modern world, but older adults can't leave their native place, so they stay there as the last residents, and then, several years later, when they have bought the farm, so to speak, villages get abandoned. Another problem is access to medicine. In some places, people have to drive tens and hundreds of miles to the nearest doctor. But many villages are still thriving. Some towns receive more funding and have developed agricultural businesses. Besides, not everyone likes city life. Often city administrations specifically distribute free land to people in rural areas so that they can build houses there.
He's known as a creature of pure terror, a monster that inspires fear in all who gaze upon him. His name is Bigfoot. This hulking beast was said to have shaggy fur covering his massive frame. His eyes were glowing, fiery orbs of orange and red, and his teeth were sharp and jagged like knives. His massive hands had long, sharp claws that seemed to glow with weird energy. His most famous feature? His feet. Massive and heavy, with thick, sturdy toes that seemed to be able to crush anything in their path. Whenever he moved, the ground trembled beneath his weight, and his growls sounded like a volcano was just about to erupt. Sure, we've all heard the stories and seen the movies, but did Bigfoot really exist? Is he still out there, just waiting for people to notice him? Let's look at some of the information we do know for sure. Bigfoot became well known back in 1958. when a man from California named Ray Wallace claimed to have found large footprints near his work area. For years, his kids believed the whole thing was just a prank pulled by their father. People have reported finding many more footprints and a few handprints that were similar, but some of them were left by bears, others were fake, and many others can't be explained to this day. But the legend of Bigfoot predates this event. In 1955, a man named William Rowe said he saw a creature that looked partly human and partly animal while hiking on Mica Mountain in British Columbia. He later signed a document stating that the creature was about 6 feet tall, had brown silver-tipped hair, and had thick arms, broad feet, and breasts. Then there's the story of Albert Ostman, who claimed in 1924 that while he was camping alone near Toba Inlet in British Columbia, he was taken by a Bigfoot and held captive by the Bigfoot's family for a week. The man eventually escaped when the Bigfoot, father of the family, became sick after eating some of Ostman's belongings. There are no other Bigfoot memorabilia like the 1967 video called the Patterson-Gimlin film. Some people think it shows Bigfoot, but most scientists think it was just a person in a costume. The film is still often used by people who believe in Bigfoot as evidence that it's real. There are even scientists who think the film might not be fake. It's become more believable over time because of new scientific discoveries about how our ancestors walked. This opinion is based on the discovery of Lucy, a 3.2 million year old human ancestor that walked on 2 legs, which proves that our early ancestors were similar to apes and could walk like humans, just like Bigfoot. There's also a video on YouTube of Bigfoot in Provo Canyon, Utah that's very popular. The video shows a big black animal in the trees, possibly eating or looking for food. As the camera zooms in to get a closer look, the creature stands up on 2 legs like a person. Obviously, the people filming it got extremely frightened and ran away at once. The video was posted in 2012 and has been watched more than 7.6 million times. The people who made the video were not really looking for Bigfoot. They were simply camping and wanted to see some deer. They initially thought that they saw a bear until the huge creature stood up and looked straight at them. They ran to their car and left their tent and stuff behind. Their belongings are most likely still there. Skunk apes are said to be a species of Bigfoot-like creatures that people think live in swamps in the southern United States. In 2013, a video was posted on YouTube showing a potential skunk ape in a swamp in Mississippi. The creature in the video appears to be very strong and has short, broad shoulders, a small head, and long legs. Some believe the video is real, but others think it's a hoax because the camera often moves around quickly or the person filming runs away just when the creature is about to be seen clearly. This makes it hard for skeptics to believe in the existence of Bigfoot, and they've continuously asked for more evidence, like pieces of Bigfoot bones. This is probably the reason why 2 men claimed that they had found a frozen Bigfoot while hiking in Georgia. But what they had found turned out to be nothing more than a gorilla suit. They didn't back down, though. One of the men also later claimed to have injured and captured another Bigfoot in Texas in 2012, and even charged people to see it. But later he admitted it was fake too. In reality, we have no physical evidence that this creature exists or ever existed. Whenever people claim they have proof that Bigfoot exists, scientists usually find that the evidence is actually from well-known animals or humans. For example, in 2014, a group of researchers examined 36 hares that were believed to belong to Bigfoot. Almost all of the hairs turned out to be from animals, such as cows, raccoons, and deer, as well as from humans. They did find something surprising, though. 2 of the hairs were similar to those of an extinct type of polar bear. Scientists concluded that these hairs could have come from a new type of bear, or a mix of different bear species. But they were definitely from a bear, not a primate like Bigfoot. Another possible theory that could explain these Bigfoot sightings is that the noticed creatures are, in fact, chimpanzees, gorillas, or orangutans. This idea is often mentioned in connection to skunk apes because some people believe that the hot and humid climate in the southeastern U.S. could let this species thrive there. Sure, Bigfoot might be entirely made up, but it may not be on purpose. Our brain has a lot to do with it too, all because of a little thing called pareidolia. This is the tendency to see patterns or familiar objects in random or ambiguous things, such as seeing faces in clouds or animals in inanimate objects. It's a psychological phenomenon that can lead people to perceive things that are not actually there. We might be tricked by our brains into thinking we've seen Bigfoot, because we tend to spot human-like shapes in our environment. This often happens with blurry photos or videos of the supposed Bigfoot. Other people believe that Bigfoot is a type of ape that used to live in Southeast Asia and is now extinct. These people think that Bigfoot may have come to America by a land bridge that used to connect Siberia and Alaska during the last ice age. However, there's no evidence of this ape in America, and we don't know much about how it moved because scientists only have the fossils of its jaw and teeth to study. Some specialists believe this ape might have walked on 2 legs, but others say it walked on all 4s because it was so big. Some scientists believe that Bigfoot could be an extinct species called Paranthropus, which used to have a skull similar to that of a gorilla. It walked on 2 legs. However, the Paranthropus fossils have only been found in Africa, so there's no reasonable explanation for the Bigfoot sightings in America. Others believe that Bigfoot could be related to the Gigantopithecus, a type of ape that lived millions of years ago. Some people have even suggested that Bigfoot could be the missing link between apes and humans, but this idea is not supported by scientific evidence. There are theories that claim that Bigfoot was actually a Neanderthal. We do know for sure that Neanderthals are extinct because there are no known living individuals of this species. All evidence suggests that Neanderthals became extinct around 40,000 years ago, and there have been no confirmed sightings or discoveries of Neanderthals since then. Also, no remains of these species have ever been found in the Americas.
Now imagine the scene. You arrive at the airport in Hawaii a bit earlier and decide to chill in the waiting area. Suddenly, you notice an anxious blonde lady in a white dress standing at a gate. She's looking out the window on the runway, waiting for someone's arrival. You reach into your bag for some chocolate to comfort her. But it's too late. She vanished into thin air. Congratulations! You just met the lady in waiting, a resident phantom of the Honolulu International Airport. Like any phantom, she has a grim backstory. The lady once fell in love with a man and he promised to marry her. But then the happy groom flew abroad and never returned to his bride. His betrayal broke her heart and she took her own life. But her phantom is still attached to the airport, and she waits for her man to return just like the famous Japanese dog Hachiko waited for its master. Over the years, the local police have collected numerous complaints about the lady phantom wandering around the gates and other restricted areas of the airport. Also, this entity likes to hang out in public bathrooms, just like Moaning Myrtle from the iconic fantasy novel. Some airport employees reported seeing paper dolls unfolding on their own while cleaning empty bathrooms in the middle of the night. In some cases, toilet seats slam shut and toilets flush by themselves. However, it's unlikely to surprise anyone since many public bathrooms have automatic flushing. Unfortunately, this urban legend doesn't clarify the way to release the heartbroken phantom. But at least this story is a good reminder to think twice before you make any promises. And speaking of spooky ladies in white, the Kempegowda International Airport in India also has one. A pilot once noticed a weird woman in a white sari on the runway. He called the airport workers asking to help her, but she disappeared by the time the staff arrived at the spot. Numerous witnesses have seen the same phantom in other parts of the airport. The lady haunted people in the cargo department, on escalators, and even in the parking lot. According to the media, nobody knows her background or the reason why she's here. Maybe her luggage was lost and she's just trying to get it back. Today, Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok is one of the busiest airports in the world. But it doesn't stop this transport hub from also holding the title of the most haunted place in Thailand. Although imagination tends to draw something old and dusty when we hear the word haunted, Suvarnabhumi is relatively new. It started operating in 2006, but it turned out that the land under the airport used to be an ancient burial site. Work crews had to drain a marshland called Cobra Swamp to prepare the land plot for building. And mysterious events began to occur from the very first days of work. Wailing, creepy screams, and even classic music came out of nowhere. Some builders refused to continue construction because they were too scared of evil forces. The locals believed that they had angered the entities who were sleeping beneath the new airport. That's why 99 Thai monks were invited to perform a ritual. Together, they chanted for 9 weeks to clear all the bad vibes. The ceremony was almost finished, but suddenly a random man interrupted the monks and claimed to be possessed by one of the local entities. His message was pretty clear. You should build a proper spirit house to guarantee the smooth operation of the airport. Having said that, he fainted. Later, the guy woke up feeling normal and conscious. Well, the airport authorities decided to fulfill the mysterious request. Spirit houses are part of Thai traditional beliefs. Landowners build nice tiny shrines to establish friendships with invisible entities who might inhabit their plots of land. So, if you ever find yourself at the Bangkok airport, don't forget to check out this artifact, as well as the churning of the ocean, the remarkable sculptures that depict the ancient Hindu myth. The story is basically about light and dark deities working together to get Amrita, the beverage of immortality. Now, here's another reason why you should think twice before building a transport hub on questionable land. Welcome to Denver International Airport, reportedly one of the most famous haunted airports in the world. It stands on a special isolated plot of land that was considered sacred by its former residents, according to the media. People reported multiple problems and strange incidents going on at the airport from the very beginning of construction. Today, this place attracts numerous mystery hunters, and the number of urban legends around the airport multiplies. Some investigate the hidden meaning behind the local murals and gargoyles. Others believe that the giant cobalt-colored horse statue in front of the airport is haunted. That's because the sculpture, known as Lucifer, took the life of its creator, Luis Jimenez. In 2006, a piece came loose and hit the sculptor while he was finishing his work. The airport's enormous layout and remote location inspires some people to speculate that there's a secret bunker under it. In fact, it's bigger than some real cities like San Francisco, for example. But the spokesman of the airport debunked that myth, saying that this transport hub must support at least 50 million travelers a year, and thus it needs to be huge. Our next destination may inspire you to revisit the Langoliers, created by the legendary horror writer Stephen King. Although the thriller took place at King's hometown airport in Bangor, Maine, we'll be talking about the historic Chandler Airport, located in Fresno, California. This place has many abnormal stories to tell, including reports of people going through the old terminal wall. Some passengers heard disembodied voices in the airport restaurant. The kitchen staff once reported hearing a suspicious noise while cleaning up. They went to see what was going on and witnessed a plate moving across the counter and then falling onto the floor. Perhaps the invisible customer was just upset by overly high food prices. Hey, it could happen. Just like Honolulu Airport, Chandler has a resident phantom. It's an old man in the control tower. Thankfully, this guy doesn't bother anybody. According to witnesses, he's just staring at the field as if he's watching invisible aircraft take off and land. Meanwhile, the urban legend behind Savannah Hilton Head International Airport is spooky and romantic at the same time. It says the following: if you land right after sundown, you'll get the chance to see two phantoms along the north side of the runway. Now, the legend says these are the phantoms of Richard and Catherine Dotson, who used to live on the land underneath the airport. They don't bother the passengers or staff either. It seems like they're just greeting arriving people. Now, our list can't be complete without the UK's Manchester Airport. This busy place serves around 28 million passengers a year and also hosts a few spooky phantoms. Passengers and staff reported seeing creepy figures and weird phenomena, such as doors slamming on their own. The airport archives from the 1970s revealed that some staff refused to show up at Terminal 3 alone after dark because they were too scared. One night, the local workers saw a figure in a pilot's hat entering a toilet. No flights were scheduled to arrive or depart at that time, so he decided to follow the mysterious gentleman. But the bathroom was empty, and the motion-sensitive lights didn't show any reaction to the stranger. Some people reported meeting face-to-face with a phantom of a pilot in an old-school uniform. He usually wanders around Terminal 3 looking disoriented. But unfortunately, no one knows his backstory for sure. Another spooky resident of the airport is the Night Watchman, a phantom of a security guard from the 1960s. A former airport employee once met this gentleman and tried to talk to him, but the figure simply vanished into thin air, leaving the poor guy in shock. After that, he decided to leave his job for good. I can understand that.
Alrighty, folks. Gather around and let me tell you about the Manananggal, a real charmer of a mythical creature from Filipino folklore. She's often described as a lady who likes to snack on sleeping pregnant women. But here's the twist. During the day, she's all dolled up and looking like a total babe. But come nightfall, she detaches her torso and spreads her massive bat-like wings to fly off into the darkness in search of her next victim. And she doesn't just stop at pregnant ladies. Nope. Sometimes she'll use her good looks to lead astray men and take them to her secret hiding spot where she'll feast on their heart, intestines, and other internal organs all night long. Yikes. If you're ever faced with a Manananggal and want to stop her from reattaching her body before sunrise, just sprinkle some salt, ash, or crushed garlic on the remaining half of her body. Easy peasy, right? So keep an eye out for this winged wonder and don't forget the garlic! Okay, so check this out. In German folklore, there's this crazy creature called an Alp. Basically, it's like a vampire, mixed with an incubus. And it wears this dope hat called a Tarncap that gives it all kinds of powers. This dude is all about preying on women at night by messing with their dreams. Oh, and it's into breast milk and sucking the blood of men and kids. The Alp can shapeshift into all kinds of stuff, like cats, pigs, dogs, snakes, and even butterflies. And it's got this evil eye that can totally mess you up with bad luck or sickness. But don't worry, you can protect yourself by hiding a broomstick under your pillow, pointing your shoes towards the door, hanging iron horseshoes from the bedpost, or putting a mirror on your chest. And if all else fails, just leave the lights on all night and shove a lemon in its mouth if you catch it napping during the day. Meet the Pontia Nuk, a spooky ghost from Malay mythology. Legend has it that she was a woman who passed away while giving birth, and now she's out for revenge. She's not your average ghost either. She's got long black hair, sharp fingernails, and a blood-smeared white dress. But watch out, because she's also a master of disguise. She can transform into a beautiful woman to lure in her prey before ripping out their insides. If you're ever out at night and hear the cries of babies or feminine laughter, beware. That could be the Pontia Nuk coming to get you. And if the sounds are quiet, she might be right around the corner. So keep your wits about you, and don't fall for any too-good-to-be-true ladies. Hey, did you know that according to Irish legend, every family has their very own banshee? This banshee lady is supposed to let out a piercing wail or shout when someone in the family is about to kick the bucket. Talk about a not-so-subtle warning, but don't let her eerie cry trick you. This banshee lady is said to be drop-dead gorgeous with long flowing locks and crimson eyes from all her crying. She's also known for wearing a gray shawl over her green threads. fashionable and spooky? We're into it. Some people even say that this banshee can transform into a sweet singing young lady who foretells the doom of the family. Yikes. And if that's not enough to give you goosebumps, she's also been spotted hunched over in the woods, crying her eyes out at night. Sounds like a real party animal, doesn't she? So next time you hear a blood-curdling scream in the middle of the night, just remember, it might just be your friendly neighborhood banshee giving you a heads up. Now let me tell you about the Chupacabra. These creatures are like the boogeyman of the Arctic. They live near the ice floes and are known for snatching up kids who get too close to the water. But don't worry, it's just a myth to keep children safe. Now, the appearance of these critters varies from story to story, but they all have some things in common. They've got slimy green skin, long hair, and long fingernails. Their hands are webbed like a fish, and they wear these fancy parkas made out of eider duck feathers. Oh, and watch out for their flippers. One of them can emit a sound that'll paralyze you. But don't fret, you can outsmart them. Some clever Inuit hunters figured out that if they asked the Chupacabra to shapeshift into a seal or whale, they could easily finish it and bring home a tasty catch. Yum! Some stories say that these creatures use kidnapped children to keep their hair looking fabulous. Talk about dedication to hair care. Others say that the kids are just devoured or used to fuel the Chupacabras' youth. But here's a wild tale for you. There was once a grandma who couldn't feed her grandson, so she called upon a Chupacabra to take him away. The tribe eventually got back on their feet, and a young couple went to rescue the boy. They found him tethered to seaweed by the Chupacabra, but every time they got close, she'd drag him back underwater. They ended up waiting until sunrise to cut him loose. Yeah, the Chupacabra may be spooky, but they're just looking out for the kiddos. And who knows? Maybe they'll give you some hair care tips if you're lucky enough to meet one. Let me present to you the scariest horse-like monster in all of Scotland, the Nucklavi, or Nuckalavie. This bad boy has a skinless body, a head 10 times bigger than a human's, and a breath so poisonous it can destroy animals and crops. So, it's got wicked powers that can cause chaos all over the islands. But fear not, because there's an old spirit known as the Sea Myther who can control this terrifying beast during the summer months. The Nuckalavie has roots in Norse and Orcadian folklore, and was first documented by the mysterious Joe Ben using some fancy Latin manuscripts back in the 16th century. Ernest Marwick, an Orcadian writer and folklorist, thinks that this evil sea creature is similar to the Norwegian Nok, the Nuggle of the Shetland, and the shape-shifting Kelpie or water Kelpie. So, if you're ever out and about in Scotland and come across this scary guy, just remember, call on the Sea Myther and run for your life. This dude is South African Tokolosha. It may look like a gremlin, but trust me, it's way more mischievous. Apparently, witches and shamans can summon them with their magical powers, but there are ways to keep these troublemakers in check. One way is to give them some curdled milk. Apparently it's their favorite. And trim their hair so they can see. If that doesn't work, you can call in a witch doctor to use some good old-fashioned magic to exorcise them away. Now, according to South African folklore, these tokoloshes are mostly invisible and can suck on a stone to stay that way. So, if you want to keep them away from your home, scatter some special blessed salts, aka tokoloshe salts, along your door frames and windowsills. Or if you're feeling extra cautious, put some bricks under your bed's legs. Better safe than sorry, right? Have you heard of the Chimera? She's a total monster, literally. This fire-breathing female hybrid is made up of all sorts of animal parts. Think lion-like body, goat-like head, and a tail that ends in a snake's head. According to Greek mythology, the Chimera is the child of Typhon and Echidna, and her sisters are Cerberus and Lernaean Hydra. Sounds like a family reunion, huh? But don't worry, our hero Bellerophon was up for the challenge. The king of Lycia sent him on a mission to defeat the fearsome Chimera, and Bellerophon was the greatest hero monsters were scared of. The Chimera was no match for Bellerophon and his trusty Pegasus. Even though the king was secretly hoping the Chimera would take out Bellerophon instead, in the end, justice prevailed, and the Chimera was defeated. Well, that's it for today.
Thick fog is rising over the ocean as the sun is slowly sinking towards the horizon. It's hard to see further away than a few dozen feet, but that's enough to notice a hulking, skeletal shape in the distance. As your ship approaches the figure, your heart beats faster, and then you make out the details of another vessel, abandoned by the looks of it. Ghost ships do exist, and their mysteries aren't always solved. Take MV Hoita, for example. It was a wooden vessel built in 1931 as a luxury yacht. It had served well to various people over 20 years before it was bought by a Samoan sailor and became a merchant ship. In 1955, though, Hoita's service came to an abrupt and mysterious end. On October 3rd, it set sail for another trading voyage that should have taken no more than 48 hours. Delays happen in the sea, so when Hoita didn't arrive on October 5th as scheduled, there was little worry yet. But then it failed to come on the following day too. There was no distress signal or any other sign of Hoita's presence anywhere between its departure and arrival points. A search and rescue party was dispatched to find the ship, and for 6 days, they were scouting the area of nearly 100,000 square miles. On October 12th, the mission returned to the base empty-handed. Hoita vanished without a trace. It was only a month later that another merchant ship, Tuvalu, noticed the missing vessel far away from its route, drifting in the open sea and listing heavily. The sailors boarded the ship and found that all of its crew and passengers, 25 people total, were missing, along with all the cargo the vessel had been carrying. The radio was tuned to the International Distress Channel, meaning that the crew had been trying to ask for help, but they couldn't reach anyone because the radio cable had been damaged, limiting the range to 2 miles. The lifeboats were missing as well, indicating that people on board must have left the ship. Unfortunately, they seem to have taken the logbook with them, leaving the rescue team clueless as to what had happened. Even today, the mystery of MV Hoita hasn't been solved yet. No one knows where the crew and passengers had gone and what had caused them to leave. SV Carol A. Deering wasn't a ghost ship in the usual sense of the word. There were no sightings of it in the open sea. Instead, it was found on the shore, but the circumstances of it running aground are a puzzle shrouded in mystery. Carol A. Deering was built in 1919 in Maine, and it was a large vessel made for commercial voyages. Unfortunately, despite its large cost of construction, it had only served for a year before its last trip. July 19, 1920. The ship was traveling from Puerto Rico to Rio de Janeiro via Newport News to deliver a cargo of coal. It was almost halfway to the final destination when the captain fell seriously ill, and the crew turned back to drop him and his son off and replace the captain. The voyage went without incident, but when it came to Barbados in December to resupply, there were strange moods among the crew. The first mate didn't seem to be happy with the new captain. No one paid much attention to it back then, when they probably should have. The last sighting of Carol A. Deering at sea was on January 28, 1921, when a lightship noticed it off the coast of North Carolina. There was some commotion on the quarterdeck of the ship, where the crew were normally not allowed. Then, another vessel sighted it, but there was already no one on the decks. On January 31st, the merchant ship was found hard aground in the Diamond Shoals, a site notorious for numerous shipwrecks that had been occupying there for centuries. When the search and rescue party boarded the ship, they found it abandoned, the log and personal belongings of the crew gone, along with the 2 lifeboats. There is still no answer to what happened on board of Carol A. Deering that January, although the most popular version was mutiny. Maybe we'll never find out the truth though. SS Beichimo is perhaps one of the most notable ghost ships in history. This large cargo steamer was built in 1914 in Sweden and plodded its way dutifully over 16 years, trading provisions for pelts with native tribes of Alaska and Canada. But then, on October 1st, 1931, Beichimo got caught in pack ice. At first, it seemed the crew would be able to wait it out and continue on their route because the ship broke free in a couple of days. But in less than a week, it became caught again, this time for good. In another week, a rescue party was sent to fetch 22 of the Bechismo's crew, while another 15 remained behind to wait through the winter if necessary and get the ship back. But a month later, after a powerful blizzard struck their camp, the sailors went out of their shelters only to find the ship gone. Luckily, a few days later, a native hunter told the Bechimo hadn't been lost yet. He'd seen it about 45 miles from where they had been stationed. They managed to track it down, but decided the ship wouldn't survive the winter, so they took the most valuable cargo from its hold and abandoned it. They were wrong though. SS Bechimo did survive that winter, and many more that followed. When the ice broke, it sailed away on its own, drifting listlessly along the shores of Canada and Alaska. There were numerous sightings of the ghost ship, sometimes adrift in the open sea, and at other times stuck in the pack ice again. People attempted to board and salvage it, but weather conditions or lack of equipment always prevented them. SS Bechimo was last sighted by native Alaskans in 1969, 38 years after its abandonment. What became of it later remains unknown. The story of SS Orang Medan is one of the most puzzling and harrowing ghost ship stories of the 20th century. No one even knows for sure if the ship even existed in the first place. It wasn't recorded in Lloyd's Shipping, the International Register of Ships, which makes it either a tall tale or a vessel that avoided being officially recognized for some shady reasons. In any case, the accounts as to what happened to the Medan vary. According to most reports, it was carrying some unknown cargo in the Indonesian waters when a distress call was received by another ship in the vicinity. The officer on duty heard an SOS message, but its contents are different depending on the accounts. The message did not repeat, and the crew of Medan didn't answer to any attempts to contact it back. The ship that received the distress call hurried to the rescue, but they only reached the vessel the following day, when it was already drifting and slightly listing. When the rescuers boarded the ship, they found that none of the crew had survived. However, one lifeboat was missing, which implied that there was at least one crew member who managed to escape. What happened to the rest of the people on board remains a mystery to this day. Still, there are no hard facts about this story, so we might never find out whether SS Orang Medan was actually a ship and not a thing of fiction. SV Zabrina was a 3-mast sailing barge built in 1873 for river trade ships in South America. She served for well over 4 decades, proving to be a sturdy and reliable ship. It was later transferred to Europe, where it continued serving its purpose well. But then, in October 1917, Zabrina set sail on a regular voyage only to be found ashore several days later. Mysteriously, although the ship was perfectly intact, the entire crew of 5 and the captain were gone. There is no direct evidence or hard facts as to what really happened that day. The most convincing theory is that the crew were washed away from the deck because of an underwater explosion. And then the ship sailed ahead without them, but the truth, as always, remains unknown. In 1975, in Puerto Rico, a farmer saw most of his goats lying lifeless on the ground. He got closer and saw that the animals were stiff and had 2 puncture marks on their necks. Goats were not the only animals that were hurt. Many pigs, cows, and geese lost their lives too. They all had the same distinctive bite marks on their necks, and all had been drained of their vital fluids. The locals immediately jumped to conclusions and blamed dogs, and the authorities didn't bother to do a better investigation and just said dogs had done it without looking for any proof. A couple of days later, though, many more animals were found deceased. Among them was a cow that had literally been opened, and it had a lot of scratches on its head. The farmer next door reported that his chickens had been destroyed by something. In just a few weeks, the creature took the lives of 90 farm animals. After some time, another farmer said that 10 of his goats had been drained, 7 had been hurt, and 11 were missing. This time, the authorities didn't waste any time and started the monster hunt, but they had no luck finding the culprit. The incident was all over the local newspaper, and the beast was named the Vampire of Mocha.
The incident caught the attention of the Agricultural Commission, and scientist Juan Rivera was tasked to solve this otherworldly mystery. His first suspect was a Puerto Rican boa. This non-venomous snake can grow to be a little over 6 feet. Still, its diet consists of only small prey. It's also very shy of humans and other animals. It avoids bigger creatures at all costs. You're more likely to see fish climbing trees than this boa taking down a whole cow. Near the crime scene, a large cave was discovered, and we all know that weird creatures like living in dark, cold caves. In the cave, they found some crazy-looking bats. As we've seen in movies, bats can turn into vampires, so they must be the culprit. But no, bats were as innocent as they could be. Their favorite food wasn't cows or goats, it was figs. They were peaceful fruit-eating bats that didn't care about animals. Again, the researcher hit a wall. Suddenly, all the terror stopped in July 1975. It seemed like the creature had vanished into thin air, but not for long. 2 decades later, 62 miles from the previous site, more animals were found. A local vet examined them. He was terrified to discover that every animal had 2 precisely cut holes like he had never seen before. The animals were anemic and looked like they'd passed away recently. By the looks of it, the creature's favorite food was goats, and that's how it got the infamous name we all heard of, Chupacabra, which means the goat sucker. Dogs, chickens, rabbits, and other animals were not off the menu. In short time, the Chupacabra took 1,000 farm animals. Now, this animal had a name, but people still had zero idea about what the Chupacabra looked like, which was terrifying. In Canovanas, Madeline and her mother reported seeing a weird creature that could have been the Chupacabra. They said it had been walking on 2 legs like a human and resembled a kangaroo. They mentioned that the monster also had spikes on the back, no ears, large dark eyes, and 2 holes for a nose. It had 2 arms with 3 fingers. The Chupacabra seemed to like Madeline's house because her husband and his coworker found it in the garage. They tried to capture it, but didn't succeed. Madeline later drew a detailed sketch of it. Many people saw the sketch and reported seeing a similar creature. They claimed it had strong legs and wings and smelled like sulfur. Take all these descriptions with a grain of salt. If they'd been true, they would have been all over the news. But still, keep in mind these descriptions. They will be important later in the story. In 1976, on some talk show, they talked about the Chupacabra, and the show quickly went viral. Soon, people started reporting having seen a similar creature in Florida and Mexico. Many said that the stories were like a unicorn rodeo. They were totally made up. In Mexico, 2 skeptical inquiries, Patricia and Mario, laid traps around those farms where the Chupacabra had allegedly been seen. They caught some animals in their traps, but no sign of the goat sucker. They only captured wild dogs. The police stated that the Chupacabra was just a wild dog, not a mythical creature. And still, in the next 5 years, there were numerous sightings of the Chupacabra worldwide. On the 13th of August of the year 2000, a farmer from Nicaragua found 25 of his sheep and 35 of his neighbor's sheep hurt. So he decided to take the matter into his own hands. One night, he was patiently waiting in the pitch-black night for the creature to appear. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw something and managed to hit it. The creature passed away. Finally, they had proof that the Chupacabra was not just a fairy tale. It was a big thing. Later, the Chupacabra was examined by a vet. The vet was shocked because he had no idea what the creature was. Remember Madeline's description? Well, the vet described the animal differently, but his story turned out to be more plausible. This Chupacabra had large teeth, giant claws, greenish eyes, bat-like skin, and a crest sticking out of its back. The vet concluded that the animal was some kind of hybrid. They thought it was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, but it sounds like an exaggeration and is hard to believe. We all know that such a mix is impossible. They did some tests on the body at the university in Nicaragua, and the results didn't quite deliver what they had expected. The animal was a wild dog with mange. Mange is an itchy skin disease that causes dogs to lose their hair. It's also highly contagious. When a dog has mange, their skin becomes scaly and wrinkled. When they returned the body, the farmer noticed it wasn't his Chupacabra. 7 years later, another body was found in Texas. Phyllis Cannon returned to her farm and noticed that some of her chickens had passed away. All seemed to be anemic. Later, she saw coyote-looking creatures that didn't have any hair. More of her animals were harmed, so she had to set up cameras on her farm. But unfortunately, like always, she didn't manage to record anything. Surprisingly, she got a call from a local farmer who had found the Chupacabra hit by a car. Later, another body was found much closer to her farm. She took some pictures of the animal, and soon, those images were all over the internet. Phyllis was curious and sent 5 DNA samples to 5 different universities. The results didn't match any animal in the archives. Researchers had no idea what it was, but it wasn't a dog. Phyllis still has one animal in her freezer and a taxidermied specimen in her house. There are many theories about the Chupacabra. Some claim that the animal is a genetically modified monkey that escaped the lab. Others state that it's some mysterious, otherworldly creature. The most consistent hypothesis is that the Chupacabra is a mix between a Mexican wolf and a coyote with mange. Now, do you remember that Phyllis said that she had sent samples to 5 universities and no match had been found? Well, it turned out she hadn't been telling the truth. At one university, they found that the animal was a mix between a coyote and a Mexican wolf and that it had mange. Animals with mange are weak and will likely try to hunt farm animals to survive. People, when they see something they don't know, tend to exaggerate, which is why all witnesses describe the animal differently.